Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about a really exciting experience that I've had in this past year. It's been a really exciting year, but as a matter of fact, there's a long story that leads up to it because it wasn't just what happened in this year. It takes a while to get to the point where we were at, and so I'm going to start with how it all started for our team. So our skip, Mike Anderson, who's the gentleman throwing the rock in the middle, played with Sean Harrison for the longest time. The other gentleman is circled in the picture. And they were looking to form a mixed team back in 2010. So they first got together. Sean brought on Lauren Harrison, who is, formerly his girlfriend. They're now married. And when they were looking to find a fourth player, that's when I got the call. We competed and won at the university championship back in 2008. So I circled, there's little me, there's Mike. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a picture without his eyes closed. That's the best one I got. But when they thought back to who can we get as a fourth player, he thought back to our university championship days and gave me a call. So it was a pretty exciting time for us, and I knew Mike a little bit because through the university we both competed for Wilfrid Laurier University, and then we went over to compete at the World University in China, but I really didn't know Lauren at all, and I only knew Sean briefly. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't say much. When he says something, it's always important, but he doesn't say much. So we were really just forming, but we did so really quick, and one of the foundations of our team is that we're friends first. So this is really important for us. We don't get paid the big bucks to curl, particularly when it comes to mix. There are very few competitive curlers who can be full-time and have that funding in the world relative to other sports. It's starting to get better, and there's starting to be more funding in the sport, but we're still not quite there yet. So something that's important for our team is that we're having a good time while we do it. This is actually a picture of us at Lauren's cottage that we go to pretty much every summer. We just have a great time. In the wedding edition of this, Lauren and Sean, as I mentioned, they got married on the far left there. And as a matter of fact, myself and Mike were in the wedding party. My wedding 2 years ago, in the middle there. And then Mike's just a couple months ago in May, he also got married. So we're a pretty tight-knit group, and but we started right from not fully knowing each other, so forming, and then we grew together. So I said it was 8 seasons in the making. So this was us back at, I believe, our first provincial championship. One of the things you have to do when you compete at a provincial is you have to have matching jackets. Now, so the color doesn't come out quite so right, but these are actually fluorescent pink. So it's really tough. Mike's about 6'4", and I'm about 5'3", and we're also, clearly a little bit different. So trying to find the same jacket was really interesting. So we've since graduated to something a little more professional. So we went on to compete at 6 provincial championships in 7 seasons together, including 3 provincial finals, 2 of which we played against Kim and her husband, Wayne Tuck. One we came out on the second place side, and the third we came out on top. And so that was 8 seasons in the making. But something that's important to know is we did a lot of losing before we did a lot of finally getting that big win in there. We did have success off the bat, but we also had some tough losses. Anytime you get into that big game, it's there's a lot of pressure that goes along with it, and it's exciting to be there, and being able to put yourself in that opportunity is something that any athlete will relish. And it was exciting to finally be able to see those dreams realized and that work realized. One of the most exciting things as a curling athlete is to be able to put on the jacket from the province or the country you represent. So especially in Canada, putting on your provincial jacket is something that's coveted by players. So this moment was really special for our team. This was our first time getting our jackets and putting them on. In particular, it was special for Lauren because it was her first jacket ever. The three of us had been competed at national championships previously, but it was her first. So this was a really special moment. Now, what's unique about the situation that we had for our playdowns is the length of time it took us to get from provincial to national to the Worlds. So as you could see in my previous slide, we competed at the provincial championship in April 2017. We had to wait until the following season, November 2017, to compete at the national championship in Swan River. To give you a little lesson, it's about 7 hours northwest of Winnipeg by the Saskatchewan border, i.e. in the middle of nowhere. So, which is wonderful because, as our skip Mike put it, he said, I have a good feeling about this. So I was like, oh. And he said, well, every time I've competed at a big championship in the middle of nowhere, it's always gone well. So I'm like, great. Swan River, here we come. And here's the highlight of what you see in Swan River. The big swan. So again, we took the time not only to compete, but there's some downtime between games. You got to fill some time, so you go and see the sights. We're fortunate. We have very supportive family and friends, and we had a lot of them there with us. And in between games, we're doing our own thing, so they're off doing theirs. And in the booming metropolis of Swan River, the host committee was offering some tours. So I know my parents got toured around by the mayor of Swan River. They had a great time. Something else that comes along with competing at national championships is being live streamed, being on TV. It can be a different experience. It brings a whole nother dimension. So not only are you playing at a championship that comes with a lot of pressure, but you have a little bit more added pressure because you've got more eyeballs on you. And getting used to that. Now, fortunately, that's where some experience is so very helpful, and why it's important to take every experience you have. Because for us, for Mike and I, we had especially played in quite a few situations where we were on TV, so it wasn't quite so intimidating to be mic'd and for anyone to potentially hear any word you say and to have the camera on you at any time. Some people just shouldn't be mic'd. Fortunately, that's not us. One of the things we do before each game is there is a draw to the button, last stone draw, in fact, and that's to help determine your seating during playoffs, among other things. To get the hammer, but also for seating later on. I'll talk about why that's important more at the world level for us. But there's a picture of us from Nationals doing it. Something else that has been really important in our success and to any successful team out there is establishing routines. And so one of the routines we had established is that we went to the same restaurant in Swan River almost the whole time. I mean, we didn't have a huge selection, but we found one we loved. And that was so important. And actually, we're not superstitious people, but our driver was, or he made himself our driver. They had various drivers who were volunteering to take teams around to anywhere they needed to go there. And this one driver latched on to us, and we grew close. And he said, I'm going to come pick you up. But as soon as we got into playoffs, he's like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to pick you up. I know we're going to go here at this time and that. And we're like, yes, we will. So he established that all for us. So this was us at the meal right before we went on to play the provincial final. So we played it against Team Quebec, and it was a really tight match. We had lost to them in the round robin, another tight match, so we were expecting a good game, and that one didn't disappoint. And fortunately, we came out on the winning end of that one, and that was such an incredible moment because we'd been trying so hard to get to the national championship for so many years, and then finally being able to get there and prove ourselves on national level was just a dream come true, really. Not to mention, wow, now we get to go to Worlds. So once you go to a World Championship, there is a team leader who's assigned to your team. So essentially, a team leader's role is mainly the logistics and making sure that the team and the coach, if there is one, is comfortable with everything. Because the less you can think as an athlete, the better. So if you have someone taking care of those little details, it is so very helpful. But in this case, we didn't have a coach, so Jim also stepped into that role, which was fantastic. I mean, as players on the ice, we all have a good idea of what's going on in a given situation, but there's something to be said for someone else having eyes looking in on you, and being able to talk to you from a different perspective. Now, I mentioned that we had played the national championship in November. Well, the World Championship wasn't for another year until October 2018. So we had a whole year to think about it. And then we had a very limited time to actually practice for it right before, because we don't get ice here in Ontario until mid-August. And in fact, Oakville is one of the first clubs in Canada to have ice. So we got on the ice as soon as we could. We played in a couple leagues. We got out to practice as much as possible, literally tried to get in the maximum number of stones we could, in order to get prepared for the play down. We each have our own competitive women's and men's teams outside, and that gives you some practice, though there's something to be said for being able to practice together as a mixed team. Of course, we had a lot of little logistical things to get to work with, and getting some shirts. This was our first experience putting on something that said Canada that all matched. It wasn't quite our jackets, but that was an exciting moment, and that's in the background there is the Thornhill Club, which is the club we represent, which is a curling facility just north of Toronto. Something else we did was in preparing for the competition, was planning out each day in detail. There are some TBDs on here that we later filled in once we got there, but in general, we knew what we were going to be doing at any given time. So again, getting to switch your brain off and just focus on what's important, which is making shots and winning. Here are the jackets. So this picture I think I took maybe 2 minutes after I opened the box with the jackets. So my teammates went ahead and the World Championships were out in Kelowna, BC. And they had already gone out there earlier, but I was staying back and playing in a competition with my women's team, which also worked out quite well because we didn't get our jackets until the day before I left. So I promptly ripped open the box, put them down, took the picture, and sent it off to my teammates because it's just a really exciting moment, if you can tell. So one of the things that we had to work with in preparing for this championship is managing the pressure of representing Canada on the national stage. Anytime you put the jacket on with a maple leaf, we usually say on your back, but they changed the design, so it's on your side now. And you have to, it comes with just this intangible pressure. Canada is expected to do well at the world stage. Perennially. Now things are changing though. As you can tell, Americans winning the Olympic gold medal. That was so exciting for curling in general. If it wasn't going to be Canada, it's amazing that it was the U.S. because that does so many things. It really brings up the excitement for the sport. So us competing for Canada, we felt that pressure there too. And then there was a little bit of added pressure too, being that we were competing in our home country as well. We were feeling a bit of the pressure, though we all did our best to kind of brush it off, each using a bit of a different strategy. Mine was just not thinking about it and focusing on all the positives that were going on and just focusing on the process of what you need to do. Especially leading up to the event. As I mentioned, we didn't have much time on the ice relative to the rest of the curling season. So there were things we had to do quickly. So we arrived in Kelowna in October 2018. So so far our whole journey has spanned 3 seasons to get to this moment. And this is us out in front of the Kelowna Curling Club. They have a really neat sign out there in the form of a gigantic curling rock. Here's our poster boy. So unbeknownst to us, Sean was the poster boy for the event. So we walked off the airplane, and this is the first thing we saw. Sean loved it. So that was great. It's those kind of things that make you excited. But it also makes you think, oh, wow, people are looking at us, and these are, there's a little bit of pressure there. One of the best things our team did was, instead of staying at a hotel, we rented an Airbnb. And that was so important because you have a lot of downtime at these competitions, and you want to try to be in a place that's familiar and has useful things like a kitchen, a living room, bedrooms, multiple bedrooms. So we rented an Airbnb, and we were lucky to even have a hot tub in this one too, which was great for after games being able to just loosen up the muscles. And we didn't know it at the time until we moved in, but we happened to get our Airbnb right next to Ireland and Switzerland. This was taken just after we all put up our flags. Of course, the Swiss are the first ones to go put the ginormous flag out there, followed by us as soon as we saw those flags go up. But it was great to be in such close proximity and see them. Everybody was kind of spread out all around the city. Teams were using a variation of hotels and Airbnbs. The reason why we go down a little bit early is to start getting acclimated and take care of some of the details, like getting a media credit or an accreditation pass, just to get in there. So, self with Lauren. This was, we also wanted to get familiar with the venue a bit. So this was it in the raw form, before any carpeting went down, before more seating went in, before the bar that our fans were going to enjoy all week went in on this side. But it was important to get a lay of the land. So we weren't actually going there to practice. We were just going there to see what it was like, see where the change rooms were, see where the washrooms were. We found out where we could go and have team meetings after the game. Those kind of things were all very important in our success. Something really neat about this is, so this is Jim Waite here again, and to his left is Jim Anderson, Mike's dad. And they actually competed in that club when the Brier was there in 1968. So they were telling us some stories, and it was a really neat experience for them to come back there. So the next thing we get into is our pre-event practice. So you're allowed to practice on each of the sheets for about 10 minutes just to get an idea of what the ice is doing, also perhaps to match rocks. And so this was our opportunity to see the ice firsthand. We weren't too sure. You're never exactly sure what you're going to run into at a world championship. You may have fantastic ice, but you also run the risk of getting on ice conditions that are a little bit more difficult to deal with. We had 34 other countries with us, and sometimes you get the opportunity to see old friends. So in this case, this was Bonnie, and she was competing for Netherlands, and I had met her about 5 years ago when my family went over to Cortina, Italy, and played in a summer spiel. So it was wonderful seeing her. I hadn't seen her there. And then you also have your international-ish friends. This is Sean Turriff. He's a coach in Canada, but he also got the call to go coach Team Scotland. So getting the opportunity, people who are familiar with you, it's just a wonderful experience. From there, you go into the opening ceremonies, which is always exciting. Of course, the ceremonial first rock and your first real look at your whole competition all in one place. And this is our flag bearer. And this is the thing, we knew that it would be exciting to be competing in Canada, but you don't realize how exciting it is until you kind of get there. Because every person you pass or walk by when you're at the curling facility gives you a big smile or like a thumbs up or like good luck, and which was really neat. I didn't know what exactly to expect, but I know this flag bearer, he was just so excited to take a picture with us. So it was those kind of experiences that really made it real and really hammer home who you are and where you're competing. Time for game faces after practice. Yeah, that's exactly what we did 2 seconds after this picture was taken. It was hard for us all to hold it together. But we kicked off the competition and got off to a pretty good start against Hungary and Slovenia. So we knew that during the week, we didn't know all the teams. We knew some teams would be more difficult than others. We had a pretty good idea of who those teams would be. And we started off against Hungary. Now, the reason why I point out these two teams in particular, so Team Hungary, their very first game. So we were a little bit nervous going into it. It had been Sean and Lauren's first time ever competing at a world championship, and mine and Mike's, it had been about 10 years since we had done it. So it's always going to be some nerves, but I mean, you also have to think the other team is going to be a little bit nervous too. So we knew that this wasn't one of our strongest opponents. And we got, when we were playing the game, we were up 6 points, and then they scored one in the fourth. I'm cleaning up the rocks, and I don't know, I have my hand somewhere here, and it looked like the skip was about to give me a high five, but I thought that would be a little weird, right? You're kind of beating them by quite a big score, but that was just weird. So I was like, okay, well, maybe that was just a one-off, and I just mistook his action. I didn't give him a high five. Fast forward 2 ends later, we were up 8-1, and then they scored another point. Well, the skip comes running to the backboard to Mike, gives him a big old high five. We got a second point! They didn't think they were going to score against us at all. And yeah, and so we sat with them after the game. They were one of our favorite teams. They were just the nicest people. They were there for development. They knew they didn't have a chance of winning it at all. They were thinking they were even challenged to win a game. But they were just the nicest people, and they were excited to play Canada. So excited. That's why they were giving us high fives. They were so excited. And which is just such a different thought, because I almost think, okay, well, I'd rather play a weaker team than possibly one of the stronger teams. But no, it's different. Other countries are excited to play Canada. And then Slovenia, we sat with each team after the game, and it was nice to get to know where they're coming from. So Slovenia, I forget what, we had Slovenia and Slovakia both in our pool, and there's a curling club only in one of those countries. So for the other country to go practice, they have to go to the other country over. Really interesting situation, not something that we often deal with. I know clubs in the States are a little more spread apart, and we're so fortunate in Canada, especially in this area, to have clubs in such a high concentration here. But they are physically going to another country. So think about that you're driving however many hours it is to maybe practice for 2 hours to then drive back. So it's just interesting to hear what other countries do, and it really makes you feel grateful for what you have. Now this is an interesting little video. So I wanted to share this with you because this kind of tells a bit about the spirit of the Hungarian team. So they're currently throwing, and this is to win the game. So they have an open hit. It's hard to see, but right there is a rock, and they have an open hit for the win over New Zealand. I'd encourage you to pay attention to the skip who's throwing, as this kind of gives you an idea of what's going on.
Got it. Come on. Yeah! We got it!
He's so excited. That's great. Yeah. That's great. Ooh, that was close. So excited. Australia.
They're just so happy. It was just heartwarming to see like a team. So they weren't going to win the world championship, but this was their big win of the whole competition, and they were just beside themselves with happiness. So something else that happens at national competitions is you're exposed to the media. They're taking pictures of you in particular. This was a photo taken of me. I think it was the second game in, and posted to the World Curling Federation's Instagram account. Now, why that's interesting? So at the first two games, like I said, it was not our best performance. We're still getting used to everything, and I knew I was having some struggles with my intern, but this picture really proved it. So I saw that picture and went, "Oy, we're gonna have to fix some things." And the great thing about a world championship is that there's the opportunity to practice at the end of the night. So after all the draws have finished, you're allowed to practice for 10 minutes on each sheet that you're playing the next day. So I went out there with Jim. Didn't need much tweaking. It was just some small things, but even this kind of, I'm a visual person, so the ability to see a picture and go, oh, that's exactly what I look like. No wonder it's not feeling great. And we went out there and we fixed it. Much better. But what was actually interesting is they had other countries scouting to get any edge, because at this point at World Championships, you're looking for any little edge and advantage. And I was told after the whole competition was scouted, that it was the first 2 or 3 games, I forget which one I had fixed it after, but the team we were playing in the 4th game had scouted that if anything, you want to try to make the vice throw her intern. Fooled you. So I was not enjoying that release right there. My wrist was just sort of cocked down. It wasn't strong enough there, and as a result, I was playing with it, and I was just kind of turning it, getting it going more than I should have there. Whereas the second picture here, you can tell the wrist is a lot more straight, a little bit of a stronger position. It goes to show no matter what level you're at, there are always tweaks you can be making, and just when you're sometimes I find that you focus so hard on fixing one thing that something else that was previously going really well all of a sudden goes down the tube a little bit. And as being in Canada, we had a little bit of media to deal with. And say deal with, it was a pleasure. It was neat that we got that kind of exposure out there. And this is Lauren. And typically, it's the skip who gets all of the sort of the accolades and end up in the media a lot, but it was Lauren who was getting interviewed, and there was a little segment on Global News about us, but the majority of it was actually about her brothers, who were in the crowd dressed up as basically walking Canadian flags, and were the loudest people out there by far, and so much so that it caught the attention of the news. Like I said, we had downtime between games, so we only had 1 2-game day. The rest were single game days. So things we did in between, grocery shopping. That's why it's so wonderful that we could be at a house and make our own things, especially since some of our teammates had some dietary restrictions that it's much easier to work with here. Mike loves it when I take pictures of him. With his big smile. Something that was unique about this championship was we were in BC, and typically when you play a curling event, there's snow on the ground and it's cold. But in BC, we were ranging between 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. And so it was beautiful. So we got a chance to go out And we're striking a Charlie's Angels pose. We call ourselves Sean's Angels. And we all just went out, and we wanted to keep a little bit active. Nothing too strenuous that we would hurt ourselves, but something that we kept going. So the rest of them were golfing, and we ended up kayaking. We also wanted to say thank you to all of our friends and family and sponsors who came out to support us. So on one of our down nights, we ended up finding a restaurant and we all went out to dinner together. So that was just kind of a wonderful moment to say thank you, because when you're competing in a national championship or even a world championship, you really don't have a ton of time with the people who actually came to support you, because you're basically thinking eat, sleep, curl, and a few other things in between. You really don't have much time. So being able to do that was fantastic. Mike enjoyed himself that evening. Something else we got to go there is they're known for their wine in the Okanagan. So we did a little bit of wine testing. We had to make sure it was all good and suitable to drink for everyone, so we were happy to help. And that was just us out in the vineyard there. But back to the curling. We finished off the round robin 6-1. We lost our only game to Norway. Really close game, but we knew that that would be our toughest game in the pool, and that we were likely the two top teams there in our pool. So we knew that that would probably drop us somewhere into the second place slot. What I mean by that is the top teams in each pool got a direct bye into the quarterfinals, and the rest were all based on not only your record, but then if it came down to tied records between them, it came down to that last stone draw that I mentioned. And by virtue of having a last stone draw that was the highest amongst the teams that didn't qualify directly to the quarters, we were ranked 5th. Now, what's interesting about that is typically when you get ranked high, it means you're playing a team with a much lower ranking. Well, it just so happens, and where it dropped into the whole pile, we were playing Slovenia from our pool again, and it dropped us into the bracket with Scotland, who is one of the top teams there as well. We actually thought that that might be a potential people we could meet in the final should we get there. But we ended up playing them in the quarters, which actually turned out to be a good thing, because you end up, if you're going to go and win a world championship, that means you're going to go through everyone and you're going to go through the best. And this was a great young team full of tons of talent, coached by Sean Turruff, as I mentioned earlier, a Canadian coach. And it was a really tough game. It came down to an extra end and a phenomenal last thrown rock from our skip, Mike, which was about a 6-foot angle raise into the 4-foot in a particularly tricky spot on the ice. Me holding the broom, all I'm thinking of is just really trying to focus on, okay, what do I need to do to make this shot? I know Mike he's pretty consistent with his releases. I also know that if he has a tendency to do something, it's going to be that in this spot. Okay, how am I going to brush it? What happens if I brush it too early versus too late or call them on? I'm thinking of all these things in my head and just trying to positively reinforce all of the things that I need to do. I was trying to leave the words "don't mess it up" out of my head, but and really, because I didn't, that's got a negative connotation. But instead of focusing on "don't mess up this shot," I was focusing on, okay, what needs to be done to make that shot. And that's something that all of the top curlers do, is focus on the positives. That'll be important for you too going forward with your curling and your whole, because we're so lucky to be able to play it for life, just focusing on things you're doing really well and not not forgetting about those. And he made it. I was pretty happy about it. It was such a big moment, and that's where all that emotion came from, because it was a big game. It wasn't the final, but it was a big game, came down to last rock, and just truly amazing. So we went on to play the semis versus Norway again. our friends. And this time we had come out on top. And that for us was really exciting because previous years, the highest Canada had ever placed was second at the World Mixed. And that was the previous year. So we had really wanted to make sure that we were, again, that pressure of Canada, we really wanted to get into that final game. Not only get into that final game, but win it. But I know I felt almost a tinge of relief that we at least that we were getting in the final in that moment. Like, whew, we did it. So you have that moment, and then you refocus on to the final. This is a little bit of how the brackets went and the game scores. So in our final against Team Spain, it was what looks like a lopsided score, and we ended in 7 ends. But really, it could have gone, there were so many points when it could have gone either way. And we just had to keep really our foot down on the pedal and keep that intensity up in order to do it. Like, it would look, the way it might have looked from the outside was that, oh, Canada is running away with the game, Canada's keeping strong. But what we can't do in that situation is focus on the end goal. We can't think, oh, we're up by a bunch, we're looking good to win the World Championship. The second that pops into your head, you forget to focus on all the things that can help you do that. So it was, for us, it might have looked a little bit more lopsided from the outside, but really it was a pretty intense game. No matter who you're playing, what it is, if you're playing for a World Championship title, it's intense. So this is us pretty much immediately after shaking hands. And what we're doing is we're turning around to our fans in the stands and sort of acknowledging them as they're going crazy. And there's nothing like hoisting a World Championship trophy up above your head, that's for sure. That's a moment I'll never forget. Now, it wasn't just the 4 of us on the ice plus Jim off the ice. We actually had a 5th man on board, but in the form from Lauren. She was 3 months pregnant at the time we played the championship. So this is little James. He was born in April of this year. And she gave us the heads up that she was pregnant when we arrived in Kelowna. So but that was okay. Some people I've been asked, like, oh my gosh, were you not concerned about not knowing that little fact before getting there? And to be honest, the first thing we were just excited because remember, we're friends first. And so we're completely excited for 2 of our friends who are having their first child. And then secondly, she was so very nervous to tell us all. And my first thought was I was excited, and she was crying a little at this moment because she was so nervous about telling us, afraid of how we would think that might impact a World Championship. So then I was actually just, I was relieved for her that she could now had this off her shoulders and could focus on the World Championship. Here's some of our friends and family. As I mentioned, they were decked out all week and cheering for us hard. It's always great to have that support. You don't always acknowledge it, but you hear it in the background, and it's so important. Here are a few more of our fans who came out. Kim's familiar with the couple on the right. So Wayne, her husband, his parents had come out to come watch us, which we thought was really neat and totally unexpected. So really exciting. And my friend Shannon and her little one, she found out the day before that we were going to be in Kelowna, and she lives about half an hour drive away, and they ended up coming in and watching 3 of our games. So it just that kind of support, even familiar faces, seeing them really means a lot. What also meant a lot is the support we received from our curling club. So this is a picture of the Thornhill Club on the banner that they put up there. Just all those little touches that they do for us were so important. They also held a fundraising night for us because we weren't fully funded to go to Worlds. The Canadian Association gives us quite a bit, but there are still other expenses that we incur. And that's also where our sponsor, his name is Chris, and he's with Angus Systems. We're lucky to be able to put our main sponsor on here, and he not only supported us monetarily, but also supported us by being there. And so it was thrilling to have that support. And the support of our spouses. So my husband, Michael, Mike's now wife, Laura, and then, of course, Lauren and Sean. Because we sacrifice a lot as athletes. We miss birthdays. I can't remember the last time I made a Thanksgiving. You have so many sacrifices throughout your life, but having those people there who support you through that is just so important, and we wouldn't be here today without it, because it truly takes a village. So this is a photo of all of us right after. Served most of our crew. A couple people had to leave early, but this is pretty much our whole crew we had out there who were there and supporting us. But despite any success, one of the biggest things we never forgot, and I hope that you never forget too, is that you have to have fun and enjoy the journey, no matter what journey you're on, whether it's a journey to a world championship, maybe it's your journey to your club championship, maybe it's your journey to win one game in the D-Flight League, whatever it is, just enjoy that journey because that's so important. That's why we're all here to play the game. We're here to get better, improve our skills, but always forget, number one is having fun. That being said, thank you so much, everyone. There you go. There you go.